Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Health Tech Entrepreneurs Meetup. So today our speaker is Emily Durfee. I'll introduce her a little more later on. And the topic is Health Revenue Models 101, your options to commercialize new healthcare solutions. So just a reminder that the Health Tech Entrepreneurs Meetup is a space where we can try to learn how to apply concepts that we might have already learned from all the webinars and seminars and office hours and try to see how we can apply them to real life. So this is a chance for everyone to discuss their own experiences. Please feel free to share tips and advice for everyone. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to hear in the future, or if you'd like to speak about your own expertise, that would be awesome. Also, we have a Slack workspace, so let me know if you want to join, if you haven't already, and please keep sending feedback. Also, we are revamping our meetups this year, so I've been advertising more widely to get the attendance up, so please share with your network. And it is also featured on our website at my startup studio. The Maryland Development Center has an events page where we have info about these meetups. I'm just going to enter that in the chat here. So please feel free to check out and sign up if you haven't already. And also, we now have sponsors. I'll now put up the sponsor page. Hold on. Oh, there we go. So thank you very much to our sponsors who help to keep these meetups going. Let us know if you'd like to sponsor these meetups. You'll be advertised on the MDC website and at every meetup this year. Wonderful. All right, so I'd like to do, trying to stop sharing. So I'd like to do our usual introduction. So I'm just gonna go down the list on my right. So if I call your name, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please unmute and let us know what you're working on. So I'll start with myself. Hi, I'm Neo. I started running these health tech meetups. Basically a year ago this month. I am the founder and CEO of Neurosonics Medical. We're trying to develop a focused ultrasound device for minimally invasive neurosurgery. I'm also the VP of Business Development at the Maryland Development Center, startup studio in downtown Baltimore, focusing on health and medtech startups. All right, I have on my right, Paula.
Yeah. I was pleased to see TEDCO as a sponsor. I was on their board for a number of years.
Oh, wonderful.
I actually founded the business incubator here in Frederick, Maryland, with the intent to draw and commercialize products inside Fort Detrick. And we've done that 15 years ago. I founded that, and we've graduated a great number of companies. I think from TEDCO's checklist, Frederick outperforms most every other incubator in the state. So we put the right place at the right place. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My last company was a supply chain company in the office and retail product space with wholesalers and the like, supply chains, logistics, all of that. I raised $92 million of venture capital back in the day. The company was sold to Insight Venture Partners, and ultimately in 2013 was sold to the Carlyle Group for $420 million. So I've had bootstrap to IPO at UUNet to board positions in non and for-profit entities. But what brought me out of retirement is a term in life sciences called cachexia, specifically cancer cachexia. And for those who don't know what it is, for the past 10 years after joining our board, I opened our Women's Breast Cancer Center and have a very long-standing tenure in breast care specifically. I'm actually a certified mastectomy fitter. And one of the problems or side effects of chemo specifically and other invasive therapies is weight loss. And it starts with unintentional weight loss. And there's a complete spectrum of the fact that chemo kills your taste buds. It kills your saliva glands. It kills your sense of smell. You're nauseous, you're fatigued, you start to have muscle wasting. And ultimately, after cancer cachexia, you will die before cancer will kill you of starvation. And so I believe we have a proprietary method to prepare meals, never touching metal, which we believe leaches into the food, creating that metallic taste that makes it impossible for patients to desire food. So we're right now raising a small angel round led by my friend in Virginia, April Young. And we intend to apply for a $2 million SBIR human clinical trial to determine if eating with utensils and cooking in metal vessels is the cause of this metallic change, specifically while you're in treatment. I don't worry about anything else, just that here and now. So that's my task.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paula. Gil?
Car, Nail, what did you skip me?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm in the car, Nail, and it's
Okay.
raining.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we hear all your rain. Anyway, Gil, so Gil, I'm gonna mute you. There's a lot of background noise. Yes, so Gil is the founder of the Maryland Development Center. Yes, so he's also a professor of electrical engineering at the University of Maryland, and he helps to start a lot of health and medtech startups at our startup studio. Let's see, Anthony?
Now, sorry, do you mind if I just quickly jump in, which is while you guys go through these introductions, again, like I prepared some remarks on this, but I want to make sure this time is valuable to you. So as you introduce yourself, if there are any like specific questions or things you were hoping we would talk through today, like feel free to highlight them just so I make sure it's, you know, we lead the conversation in whatever direction is valuable. So, okay, turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey guys. So yeah, I'm Anthony Cammarata. I have a contract CFO and controller service. So we actually do finance and accounting work for companies. But we have a couple promising med tech companies in our portfolio. So I'm always kind of seeing what people are working on and how they're, thinking about problems. So good to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Brent?
Hey everyone, so first time caller, long-time listener, Brent Chase. I've been a serial entrepreneur in my past life, sold exclusively Marshmallow brand cereals, but now I'm focusing on digitizing the pediatric autism therapy experience. Truly in between each session is the main focus for us, and really looking forward to just kind of hearing everyone else's stories and learning a little bit more about how we expand from where we are today to certainly looking to 5-10 years down the line.
Great, thank you. Chris?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Sarlo. I'm the founder of Life Science Wealth. We're a wealth company that deals exclusively with executives and owners of life science companies like yourselves. Just as you're going through the different stages of development, that we can help you through the process of what has to get done with personal wealth, to get you from point A to point B. Thank you.
Great. Chrissy?
Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy. I'm currently a postdoc at Hopkins right now, and we're working on trying to commercialize our microfluidic technology that specializes in rare biomarker detection. So we have a couple different projects that are going, but we're looking at detecting biomarkers for ovarian cancer, as well as detecting bacterial from blood in like sepsis cases. I'm excited for today's talk.
Thank you. Cyrus?
Hi, I'm Cyrus Atimadwargadan, founded RPM Tech, a product development company. We get involved with the design of various products, including medical, from concept all the way to production. We're in Hartford County. Thanks.
Thank you. Dan?
Hi everyone, I'm Dan. I'm the founder of Dentuit. We're a dental software startup developing artificial intelligence and computer vision support for dentists. I think Emily should recognize me. We did apply 1501, but I'm here mainly to write the stage of basically validating our algorithm with human comparator studies and really kind of getting some evaluation metrics out there. But I'm here to really just learn about the revenue kind of model in general, for especially in particular for software-based kind of support systems and things like that, where it's kind of unclear and it's a gray area where aspects of that can get reimbursed or not reimbursed, and if it's not reimbursable, then where does the money come from? Basically. So, thank you.
Great. Ibrahim?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ibrahim Mohidis. I am currently a fellow at the National Science Foundation in the Office of the Convergence Accelerator that looks to kind of bridge the gap in translating science into kind of societal impact. But my side thing is I'm working on a startup in the wound care space. So I've partnered with a researcher out of the Department of Veterans Affairs that developed a wound care technology, a wearable electrical stimulation bandage that accelerates wound care and prevents infection. So we're just kind of starting up on that and just trying to get connected with the general DMV area kind of biotech scene.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. This is my first time here as well. So I am a doctoral candidate at Hopkins, particularly focused on looking at the social determinants of health, especially as they relate to domestic violence prevention. Previously, I had founded and led a nonprofit in New York City for 7 years to empower survivors of domestic violence through financial health. So again, looking at the financial determinant of health, or one of the social determinants. And I am here today because this meetup really caught my eye. I very much love entrepreneurship. I love learning about others' journeys. And that's really what I'm looking for today.
Great, thank you. Kyra?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyra Mendez. I'm currently a postdoc fellow in the Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program. And as part of the first year of the postdoc, I'll be doing an MPH at Johns Hopkins. I'm interested in research in cancer prevention and control, and in the future, maybe starting my own business. So happy to learn from all of you.
Great, thank you. Renee?
Hi, so this is my second meetup. Hi now, excuse me, and I'm a PharmD by training. Because of this meetup, I found out about biohealth innovation in New York and applied for an SBIR grant, which I didn't get with BHI. However, as a result of my association with BHI, I did get a position with NIH, but for the last 6 months, right? So there's some good out of it. And I am now applying actually for an SBIR through NSF rather than NIH. They have a more commercial focus. And so I'll be very curious to see. I've never done anything with NSF before. But at the NIH, I'm part of a team that helps awardees, specifically through NHLBI, with their commercialization plans. I'm the Health Economics and Outcomes Research person, Entrepreneur in Residence we're called. There's an IP expert, there's a FDA expert, how people get through the development pathway. There's an investor in residence, and there's one other person. But anyway, it's a whole team of us, and we help these companies understand. I mean, they're all scientists, and they don't really understand the commercialization pathway. When I've gotten these grants previously, the non-dilutive funding, I only wish that I had had a group like ours, and like many of you, I think, to help me understand what I needed to do to commercialize. So that's why this is particularly interesting to me. And we set these people up to actually present at venture conferences so that they can obtain dilutive funding. So it's been really amazing for me. And thanks to this this work that now put together, I wouldn't have had that opportunity before. So it's definitely been helpful to me. I also have a small business. And that's why I've applied to NSF. And like, I think it was Dan that mentioned about different kinds of revenue models. I'm trying to create a marketplace for healthcare models. And so it would be, it's not a device, and it's not really, it's health tech of a sort. And I'm curious to see what kind of revenue model that might engender. So that's my interest here. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Renee. Ryan?
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Remkalawan, serial medical device founder, and now work in corporate innovation and venture capital.
Wonderful, thank you. Sunidhi?
I'm currently an undergrad at Georgetown. I'm currently interning with Healthworx and Emily. So really excited to be here today.
Wonderful. All right, Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm founder of Person Clinic. Person Clinic started as a joint project with NIH to create intelligent virtual care platform that unifies patient engagement, remote monitoring, and e-counseling. We focus on mental health patients with the comorbidity of chronic illness and or smoking addiction. Basically, we enables providers to design and deliver measurable treatment while we empower patients with higher engagement, self-help tools, and diagnostic modules. Thank you very much. Excited to be here. I'm a first timer, and Jennifer, I love to connect with you. The population health and domestic violence, that's the area that actually I love to get connected. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Great. Ty?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler. I'm currently working as a PhD student in biomedical engineering at University of California, Irvine. And my research mainly focuses on developing a novel devices for remote health monitoring. And I'm really passionate about the medical startup. And I have designed a compact and unobtrusive device, namely Nemo Belt, to continuously monitor the unborn baby and the mother's heart rate. And it went through several prototypes. And I just finished first clinical trial at UCI Medical Center. And I recently took a competition at my school, and it's like a startup competition. And I think like I feel I'm like a lot of knowledge about startup, especially like a business model and like how to push with the investor. Like that is a good problem that I want to like focus on. So yeah, this is my first time to join this meetup. So I'm really looking forward to learning like everything.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Wayne.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Wayne Sternberger. I'm a co-founder and lead technologist from BlockSynop. BlockSynop is a new startup, and I'm pleased to be able to say that after 40 years at Hopkins, I'm on professional leave of absence so that I can commercialize one of my technologies, which is for a non-invasive real-time fetal, to Ty's, I do have patents for fetal heart monitor, but what we're doing at BlockSynop is a non-invasive neural blockade monitor in order to quantitatively determine regional blocks for clinicians. Worked a lot with the technology over the last 20 years, and we decided it was time to go out and do something to commercialize it, get it into the hands of the clinicians. I've had opportunities to work with PHI. We're currently funded from TEDCO under a phase 3 MII, and we're pursuing NIH and NSF funding. Of course, non-dilutive is not going to get us where we need to go, so we're always open to all of the various dilutive funding. And from the standpoint of what you're asking, Emily, I'm also interested in reimbursement and how we can optimize getting payment for the users. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think that's everyone. So I'll introduce Emily Durfee. So Emily is the hub lead of Healthworx Innovation, and this is the innovation and investment arm of CareFirst BlueCross BlueShield. She's also the co-manager of 1501 Health. It's a new incubator and investment program that builds healthcare companies alongside payers and providers. And she's going to discuss regulatory strategy for early stage health and medtech companies. So now I'll hand it off to Emily.
Yeah,
Emily,
awesome.
make you the host so you can share what you need to.
Absolutely. That sounds perfect. Thank you. And, you know, really great to be here. And thank you guys all for having me. You know, honestly, listening to all of your introductions, I feel like you can teach me and each other potentially more than I can teach you. So my hope at this point is actually, you know, like I have this whole presentation. What I'm going to do, I think, is to rush through it as potentially a framing for conversation. And then I think what would be more helpful for all of us is to just have a conversation from there to hear from people's best practices. If you guys have questions, ask them to me. But I feel like there's more knowledge in the room than value from me presenting some really dry PowerPoint slides. But I will present just kind of the framing of how we have been thinking about this conversation so far, and then, you know, really would love to hear from your guys' perspective, you know, what is helpful. So fundamentally, when I talked to Now about this a few months ago, you know, we were just talking about like, what are the different options for healthcare reimbursement? And one of the reasons that this gets so complicated, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, right, is that like there are a ton of different stakeholders in healthcare, right? And like this is an oversimplified version of that, right? There are the people who actually like use and benefit from your product. There are the people who help you get it into those hands. But then sometimes the people who pay for that product are very different than the people who are ultimately using the product, either in that they're paying out of pocket or that they're getting reimbursed by healthcare insurance, right? And so navigating the complexity of like all of these different stakeholders can be really, really complicated. And so when like we break it down ourselves when we think about investing in startups or, you know, evaluating startups for 1501 Health, you know, fundamentally, we tend to kind of think about startups in a few different columns or a few different buckets, right? Which are generally laid out here. And I'm just going to kind of pull into a little bit more detail and then think this might be an interesting framing to like hear from your guys' perspective of like, what has worked for your business? What hasn't worked? What questions do you still have, right? Like, how can we use this as a way of us teaching each other where these different models can be effective or less effective? So to just quickly break them down, because again, I don't actually want to dominate this conversation because you guys all seem great. I think, you know, the first model, right, is around just like business direct to consumer, right? D2C, business to B2C, right? Business to consumer or direct to consumer means basically the same thing. And it's a really simple model, right? Like you sell something to someone and they pay you for that thing, right? Maybe it's a subscription or an in-app purchase or, you know, direct sale or whatever, but like that is a very simple model. And it tends to be really great, especially when you're launching a new product because it's a short sales cycle. There's pretty low barriers to entry. You get fast feedback, right? But it also has a lot of drawbacks in that scale is really, really difficult. And you miss out on certain types of potential, you know, customer segments who may not already have that money in pocket, especially if the solution that you're creating is incredibly, you know, expensive. Another option that you have in this, right, is the B2B model, which is basically the, you know, the end user of your product is a business, not an individual, right? So you are selling, for example, a technology solution directly to a healthcare payer like CareFirst or a medical device directly to a hospital. And that is kind of the end of the piece. And that tends to be really great because you can market, you know, leverage market relationships. You know, it's still also relatively good for fast scale depending on the expensiveness of your product. But business sales cycles are much longer than consumer sales cycles. And so that can be really complicated in that process. You know, another model that we see really frequently are kind of B2B2C models. And I actually break those down into like 3 different groups, right? So in a B2B2C model that's focused on referrals, you have a partnership with a distribution partner, and then they actually refer somebody to that, but there's usually not a lot of money changing hands there, right? So for example, you might say, hey, employer, can you market this to your employees, right? And then the employer says like, hey, employees, this would be a really great opportunity for you. You know, they are still the ones that are ultimately paying for the product, but you're leveraging these other businesses to be able to get the word out there for you, right? Which is a little bit faster in distribution than going directly to a consumer. But can be really difficult to control because you don't actually know like how many referrals you're going to get. Like you know, there still are the boundaries and blockers of being able to get specific customers into that process. And depending on like your agreement with the distribution partner, you may give them a cut of what happens, right, of the sale. And so it could kind of increase your costs and decrease your overall profitability margin. The second like B2B2C model that we often see are like sponsorship models, right? Where ultimately the distribution partner is the one who is paying for that thing, right? So we see this a lot on our side. Like we will partner as a healthcare payer with a digital health solution, right? We will pay that digital health solution, you know, either on a risk sharing agreement, lump sum, per member per month, right? There's lots of different types of payments that we can do. And then that, and then we market it and send it to our members, right? So our members aren't paying anything, they're receiving that service or product, but it's ultimately us as that distribution partner who is paying for those people to receive that service. This tends to be a really, really good model that a lot of people look for because, you know, it decreases the burden on the end user and it shifts the money burden, the cost burden to larger companies like us who can afford it. The problem is if anyone has ever worked with a traditional health system, the sales cycles are ridiculously bureaucratic, incredibly long, and very, very difficult to navigate. As well as just the integration process is incredibly difficult. And so, you know, once you get these partnerships nailed down, they can be incredibly lucrative for you. But getting to that point and having the runway to get to that point is massively difficult and complex. And then the final model that at least we see on a frequent basis, right, is you know, a B2B2C reimbursement process, right? Where like, that's where you start to get the payer into this process. So you say, okay, like maybe you are working through a hospital system that provides this service to their patients, but ultimately they're actually asking for reimbursement from payers in order to provide that service or that medical device or whatever, right? And so this is, you know, it's basically the distribution channel is helping distribute, and they are usually paying your business directly, but they are then getting reimbursed by people like us. And so I ran through that really quickly because I don't know, I feel like these are probably relatively like, these are probably models that you guys know relatively well. And so I want to turn it over to you guys next and say like, is this, first of all, did we get this framing right? Right? Like, is this a helpful way of framing out these different options? And then like, what has worked for you, right? Like, what models have you tried out? What works or hasn't worked? And like, what would you recommend for your fellow entrepreneurs in this process? I can keep talking, but you guys don't want to listen to me.
Emily, I wanted to point out one thing, and
Please?
maybe you have a answer for me. You point out very nice, challenge that entrepreneur will face. For instance, when, especially in a digital health space, when there is a partnership with existing digital health for payers, as you said, they have gone through a long cycle of evaluation and, you know, partnership making. Now, for them to switch to a new solution, new digital health solution, which most likely is a better solution, it would be an executive challenge because the executives have spent so much time and they felt that, okay, this is done for at least next 5 years. And all of a sudden they meet a new solution, which is good. They haven't tested. They don't know what is the outcome. But in reality for end user, this is a huge barrier accessing such a solution.
Yep.
I want to see what is your point of view. I mean, have you faced that? What has been the outcome?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you guys are going to hear some bias in my perspectives on this too. And that like, I come from the startup world, not really from like the payer world. And so I feel that pain because I have been there. I mean, the fundamental honest answer of that, right, is that there are incentives in, for example, a payer space that say if something is good enough, don't change it, right? Because like if your neck is on the line for it being great or being terrible, it's better to be like good enough, right? Which is like, that is one of the things that holds back healthcare innovation, because the more times that we settle for okay, the fewer times we can actually get to the thing that dramatically improves healthcare outcomes for the people that we serve as a payer and for all of the people who you guys all care about, right? And so fundamentally, right, I think first of all, you hit on a really good point around metrics. One of the things that we see really frequently at CareFirst is we're really unlikely to be able to sign a contract with a company unless they have some metrics on the impact or outcome to the end consumer. And that is where like we often see companies that will actually start by experimenting in the kind of like D2C space, right? So they get like a few hundred, a few thousand direct to consumer opportunities that they are able to then track the engagement, the outcomes, et cetera, with. Sometimes you need to contract with a payer to understand the outcomes because you need claims data and things like that, but you can at least start to get some of those leading indicators. And that is often the ammunition that you need when you come back to people like us to have those metrics. Another thing that we are going to look at, right, is just like runway and risk of failure, because it's hard to contract with a company for a 5-year contract, and then there's a possibility that they're going to run out of money in 6 months, right? Which frankly is how long it's going to take us to get through the procurement process anyways. And so I think that is something else that we look for, right? Which is like capital in the bank, other contracts that enable the duration of longevity of the company. And those tend to be other things that we look at. I mean, the reality is it's really hard to break into the established healthcare space, right? I don't want to sugarcoat that. I don't know if any of you guys have had success in that and what has launched you into that opportunity.
So Emily, if I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
That is a great approach, show us the effectiveness and we give you the opportunity. But then there is a huge difference between technology that comes out of the universities that are associated with the hospital, easy access to the patients, easy access to ecosystem to go through the trials. And then there is a startup like us, which is initiated outside of any type of health ecosystem. And we tried twice for SBIR with big player, once with Johns Hopkins and McGill University, and once with NIH itself, and we didn't get both. Now, and then we believe that is based on the science, but yet there is no funding to go to B2C model to test it that way, required huge marketing dollar.
Right.
And even in the VC space, they want evidence. So I have one question, how payers could kind of overlook this opportunity, because 1 out of 100 of these technology might be super exciting for you. That's number one. Number two, what if the payers think about, okay, we're going to give the opportunity to test it if the company comes and cover the cost of the trial? So 2 ideas or question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think those are great questions. And to, like what you described is, I mean, in startup terms, right, it's the valley of death, right? It's the point where you have an idea, you have a prototype, and it's just almost impossible to get the right combination of like the customers and the funding to be able to do the thing you need to do next to actually get it into the market, right? So I hear you. I think that there's a lot of difficulty around how you actually navigate that. And I wish I had a silver bullet answer. I don't think I understood your first point or question. So I'd love for you to repeat it. I think to the second point, right? I think the problem when it comes to payers is the process of procurement to get people integrated within the system is an incredibly complex legal and like information security process, right? Because payers are so risk averse and wanting to make sure that all of the data that they have about members is correct, that like there is no sales going to people who haven't opted in, et cetera. And so the pushback that I often hear from my colleagues is less around the payment that we would put towards the contract with a new medical device or service. And it is more about, what is basically the sunk cost of our labor and work that could be blocking our ability to do that, which I realize is not actually solving your problem, but to give at least some insight into what the thought process is there, that's one of the challenges that we see. But do you mind repeating your first point just to make sure that I address it correctly?
So I had 2 points. One, how payers can justify overlooking those potential technology that doesn't come out of those, health ecosystems, such as universities or hospitals, which might be useful to them. Yeah. And, there is a big loss on there. It was a comment, perhaps, more than the question. And the second question was, why not giving these startup a playground, the ones exclusively that are not associated with any hospital or university, exclusively to a startup that they're coming from completely independent space, a small business, to test the platform, and especially if the a startup are willing to cover the cost of even the trial. So that is low risk type of the approach.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I think to your second point, right, again, it's the question of that playground sounds obvious until you start to talk to all of the teams at a payer to understand, like, at least in my case, which is what I know best, right, to understand all of the processes that it takes to even trust a startup with the information that would be needed to be able to run those types of trials, right? And there are a huge number of hoops that like we require people to go through in order to make sure that we are, keeping our members safe, that their health information is safe, and that we have kind of made sure that all of the regulations are being followed. So I think that's the challenge there. I don't think any payer would say that there's no purposeful bias away from people who have come from medical systems. That said, I totally understand your point, which is like there is bias towards those people who have been able to prove metrics. And if you are not in a system where metrics are easy to prove, then it becomes much more difficult to understand. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. I noticed that Anthony unmuted. I'd love to hear if you had a comment.
Sorry, can I just jump in? Emily, I realize you're the host now. Are there a couple of people waiting to get in?
Oh.
Yeah, I just got a couple of emails.
Yep. Yes, I will figure out how to do that.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, I don't think I can do. Anyways, okay.
Can you make me the host again?
I will try. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one small comment, which I think you said, which is that kind of, especially with one of my clients that I'm dealing with, we are very concerned with the idea of how do we implement this without causing more work for the people that, you know what I mean? Like, so someone's going to buy our service, but how do we integrate into their existing workflow as much as possible? You know what I mean? So that we don't, so that we're not saying, okay, now you have to do another thing, right? Or you have to do this one thing differently than everything else. That's something that like we really, are try to be very considerate of.
I've been, if you don't mind if I can jump in, and I've been thinking a lot about that myself on behalf of the startup. And I wonder if one approach to that is a hybrid model where one sells not necessarily to payers for reimbursements, but to the existing maybe subscriptions that the provider is currently using as part of their current workflow, and sell to perhaps some of the existing kind of players that they subscribe to. In dentistry, it just happens to be fairly segmented. So, one dentist could be using a suite of, an array of different kind of company-based subscriptions, whether it's through Henry Schein or whatever, and then the dentist down the road may be using another array. But if you sell to, let's say, the companies themselves that the dentist is already kind of perhaps using as part of their workflow, that may ease the kind of the barrier to adoption or integration, if you will.
Absolutely, Dan. No, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that we see, right, in both direct to consumer and business to business models, right, is that engagement piece, right, which is like we all have app fatigue, right? Like if you open your phone, you probably have at least 30 apps, and how many of them are you checking regularly, right? Similarly, for a provider of medical care, they often have like 10 different software systems that they have to check and register with at a time, and it is very difficult to figure out which ones, how you integrate with those. And so I think like fundamentally, right, like you have like two main options. As Dan said, you either integrate with the things they're already checking. The downside of that is you lose value, right? Because the people who you're integrating with are going to like take a cut of the revenue that you are expecting. But there is that option. The second option is that you create such unique value for them that they are willing to add that into their workflow, right? And I think that the main way that we have seen that be valuable is, try to get in front of the person who you actually expect to use your product as soon as possible in the process of you designing it, right? Because that will give you an understanding of like how many things they are doing, what their current workflow is, and what they are likely to change about their workflow before you build a really great product and no one has the time to actually do it. Are the ways that we have looked at it. But does anyone else have any other ideas about how you do that?
Can I ask one more question that builds right off of that real quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
My question of, what's the conversation been like on value-based care and that transition? Are we even close to there? And how does that perhaps change up the revenue model slides that you showed what are the more sustainable ones that you see kind of existing through and making sense. And I will add that, as an AI startup for healthcare, it's interesting. I read a recent paper talking about how AI seems to make most sense or more sense in a value-based system where it provides better value, perhaps with better patient outcomes if you use an AI technology. And it may just be the case the paper kind of documents that they may just pay for this additional AI feature as just part of the business cost of overall, like what you kind of mentioned earlier about kind of, well, we'll just pay for it because it's so valuable to us and we'll just add it to our current workflow.
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer, Dan, is like, so of the models that I shared, and like, I'm happy, by the way, now to share the PowerPoint, and also anyone here happy to like share my email if you want to follow up after the fact. I think that there's no right answer is the hard thing about this. Is like, we tried to lay out some of the pros and cons in that slide deck. I'm sure you guys have lived some additional pros and cons that weren't on a small slide about each of these business models. But fundamentally, like, it just depends on your business. Like, is your business something that is going to be engaging enough that a consumer or business is going to pay for it immediately, right? Because it is such a deep need that like is unsolved right now, right? Or is it a really competitive landscape where being able to differentiate through partnerships and distribution channels to refer it is going to be really critical. Like, how much money do you have in the bank, and how long do you have to wait for like reimbursement codes to be approved or for like large business sales cycles to conclude? Who in the system is even willing to pay for this, right? Like, if you're trying to sell to lower income people, right, you're going to have some sort of other reimbursement or like distribution partner revenue model that is not the end consumer. And so, I think and one of the slides later that I wanted to skip over because I wanted to hear your guys' questions is like a list of questions of like, ask yourself these things as you figure out what revenue model works for you, because the fundamental answer is there is no right answer. There are a lot of wrong answers probably, but there's no one that's the silver bullet for everybody.
I'll chime in with what I find in exactly with bigger hospital systems. The bigger the system, the longer the cycle. And even if this chairman, the CEO, the CFO, it's not going to move the needle a minute. Nothing's going to change. So I've always preferred those tertiary medical markets, independent pharmacies. I am a mastectomy fitter. I have 1,500 board certified mastectomy fitters, and I'm going to use them as my resellers because I need to be where cancer patients are. And once they're diagnosed, they're not always stuck at the hospital. They go to these other wig fitters, mastectomy, breast prosthetic fitters. They have to go to special independent pharmacies because they carry the specialized medications that they need. And they're large in numbers, and they are desperate for revenue streams. They are desperate for something to sell that's not reimbursed. So our company, even though the science behind how we cook the food we cook as meal kits is designed for in-treatment cancer patients. So I want little refrigerators at mastectomy stores. I want little refrigerators wherever any cancer patient might go who is experiencing what they don't even know is wasting and ultimately potentially death. So that we have an education problem that we have to educate the patient on, that often the oncologist, my first investor, April, she has cachexia. She had it and survived it. And when she and I were conversing, I said, "Oh, so you had cachexia?" And she goes, "What is that?" I'm like, "That's what you had." And she's like, "Why didn't my doctor tell me this?" Because they're not nutritionalists. And until you get to the point, only 14% of oncologists feel comfortable talking about nutrition and the importance of dietary weight maintenance and gain. The world is so concentrated on weight loss, diabetes, morbidity, obesity. Sure, I get it. But there's a little sliver of people where weight maintenance and gain needs to be more than protein shakes and whey powder proteins. And that's what we're trying to achieve, is to infuse foods with the natural supplements that you are not allowed to do while you are in cancer. You're not allowed to take a multivitamin. You've got to get all of your nutrition naturally. And that's the challenge we're trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, like, just zooming that out a little bit, and then I've seen Wayne has his hand up, so I want to make sure that he has a chance to jump in. But just to zoom it out a quick second, right, which is I was working with another accelerator last week, and basically telling them to kind of, along the lines of the slide deck that we showed, right, like lay out what is actually happening in your model, right? Like, who is ultimately paying for it, who is using it, who has the money to pay for it, who needs to do the education for it, as Paula just mentioned, right? Like, what are the things that need to happen in your system? What are you doing, and what are you depending on other people to do, and how are money and goods circling around that? And that is something that can be very helpful when you try to explain your model to investors, especially investors, well, either investors that know nothing about healthcare and it's all ridiculous, or people that know a lot about healthcare and therefore like are going to poke holes in an argument that isn't particularly soundproof. Having that type of actual model, I think, can be really, really helpful. But Wayne, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Emily. We are obviously doing a device, so that has certain gateways that need to be passed, and we already talked about FDA and things of that nature. But in your models, you have a block that says end user. And when we were doing our ICOR for our minimum viable product and whatever the roadmap is beyond that, we had in our mind that the end user was the clinician who was going to be using that. And it was like the V8 moment, you know, oh my God, we completely forgot about the hospital value analysis committee. And that's been the bane of our existence right now. Can you tell us your thoughts about hospital value analysis committees?
I can't because I have never worked at a hospital and I don't know very much about hospital value committees. I think that what you bring up is a really important point, right? And this like gets into the nitty gritty of the sales cycle. Like, even once you figure out who your user or customer is, figuring out who the decision makers in that process is really critical, and another thing to start to map out as you figure out your like marketing and sales process. Unfortunately, I have no value to add to you in this case, but this is where having mentors in the process who like have navigated healthcare systems or payer systems or whatever, I think can be really helpful.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't answer your question in more detail.
That's quite all right. You're not the first, you won't be the last.
Don't want to pretend I know something I don't.
Emily, I'm wondering if you've had a technology to the point where, oh, how do you get beyond all of these barriers that you've talked about? That you said, you know what, this is really intriguing, even though they don't have $1 million in the bank, even though all these barriers exist. Maybe they don't even have a provisional patent, maybe, you know, but there's just something about it that you were willing to take a chance on, or you know of some fund that was willing to take a chance on and became successful.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that is not my role right now. And I wish it were. Like, to be really frank, right, in that, like, my job at a payer system is not to like get so early on into an idea, especially a medical device or something that has to go through regulatory clearance. That's just not where we play, right? And like, whether or not that's right or helping the ecosystem in meaningful ways is a different conversation. But like, to be very frank about like where we are, that's not my job. All of that said, like, I have talked to people who have taken those chances before, right? And I think the thing that differentiates the new technologies that they are willing to take the risk on are a couple of things, right? I think the first thing is newness. Like, fundamentally, is this something that doesn't exist in any way, shape, or form, right? Is this something, and then second of all, market, right? Like, is this something that like could sell into a relatively wide market, right? The condition that you are trying to solve has enough potential customers, and they feel this pain so deeply that they are likely to be paying for it, right? And then the third piece, right, that is true of any early stage investment is the team, right? Like, is this a team of people who is going to be able to bring this to life, that they have the grit and the resilience and the deep passion for this thing, that like they are going to go through the roller coaster of highs and lows of entrepreneurship and bring it to life despite all of that. And so those are the things that I think tip it over the line. But that's not, I don't look for that tip, because it's a fairly clear and like strong line in my world specifically. And Ty, I see that you have your hand up. So, or Renee, did you have any other final like
No, very interesting. You know, when I've been a reviewer of SBIR grants, ironically, for 10 years, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the team. We're looking for can these people pull it off? And is it novel? And what's the market? And the market part of the commercialization part is something that's one of the reasons why we've got this innovation office at NIH. A lot of reviewers don't know to look for the commercializability. They don't understand what are the indicators of something being commercializable. So
right. I think there's a very big difference between a novel technology and a technology that people are going to pay for, right? In the same way that there are lots of apps that I download on my phone and delete them 3 days later because they're not providing enough value for me.
Exactly. Thank you. No, thanks. That's great. Thank you.
Ty, what do you want to bring up?
Thanks, Emily, for the presentation. My question is more about the customer. Right now, the project I have worked on, to design a medical device to monitor the unborn baby and the mother heart rate. So right now, we have two main customer categories, those with the normal consumer, normal pregnant woman, and those with the high risk pregnancy. So talking about two different categories because it's more about for the high risk pregnancy, that device would be need to FDA approval, and for the general consumer, so it doesn't need FDA approval. So it's kind of I'm kind of confused which approach I should follow, because for the high risk pregnancy customer, they not many people, I mean the customer pool is less than the consumer. And so I mean, so my question is is there any advice? I mean
yeah, so I don't know your market specifically well. What I would say, the question that I would ask, right, is which customer segment is going to pay for it, or would someone pay for them? Right? It's where is the money? And that is what you chase, right? In an ideal world, if the money is in the one that doesn't require FDA approval or is equal between the two, then I would say chase the one that doesn't have the blocker of the approval, because that's just going to be an easier route for you. But if the money is fundamentally at these high risk pregnancies, and that's where you need the approval, right? That is the important piece.
So Ty, I'd just be a little careful, because FDA approval, because it's consumer versus not consumer, is it's not that simple. There's a whole lot more going on there. So just I wouldn't just assume that just because you have a device that goes directly to the consumer, it's not FDA required. What you do require in most cases, you need a CLIA waiver, which basically allows someone to not go through a full test. You just have to prove that the risk is low and everything else. That's a completely different story, and you should definitely talk to a regulatory expert. We do a lot of product development, and in the end, whatever you do, you're going to have someone who's going to have to go through and prove to the FDA that there is no, the risks are low enough that it's acceptable, that it doesn't have to be used by a doctor or a professional.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Awesome. I know we're basically at time. Does anyone else have any burning questions? I also feel like there are connections, Brent, I've been seeing message different pieces. So hopefully this is also interesting. You guys can connect with each other offline. But is there anything else that you want to make sure that we chat through today?
I'm cutting, pasting something in for Ty right now. J&J Labs is looking for maternal mortality, aiming at addressing key causes of maternal, and it's a $250,000 grant that's closing tomorrow, I believe. So it's only a simple application, but they're specifically looking for what you are doing.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Paula. Yeah, we are looking for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I see Brent also made a suggestion about trying to do maybe a demo, maybe do a landing page, see how potential buyers respond. Maybe they could sign a letter of intent as a metric of traction. So thank you, Brent. So yes, thanks everyone. Thank you so much, Emily. And I wanted to, and thanks for sharing your email. Please feel free to follow up with her if you have any questions. So I want to end with Emily. what are 3 concrete things that early stage entrepreneurs can do right now to start thinking about their revenue model?
Yeah, great question. Figure out where the money is and who is actually willing to pay for it. Talk to people to understand the current workflow so that you understand how you may or may not actually integrate with what is happening, and therefore, who's willing to pay for and use your product. And then I think the third piece, right, is figure out where you want to prioritize between speed of getting into the market versus like speed of scale in the long term. Because if you are thinking about speed of scale in the long term, you're looking more at a business to business model. But if you want to do it very quickly or to get some initial feedback and results back, you're probably going to want to think about customers. So balance that piece out as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. This was really informative and really helpful. Wish we had more time. So thank you so much. I just want to show everyone our next meetup is on July 22nd. So it'll be a little while, a little over a month away at 5 p.m. With Dr. Mir Mambachi. He is an assistant professor of neurosurgery and biomedical engineering, and also a former founder and CEO of Sonic Medical, which is a startup he founded based on his PhD work to commercialize an ultrasound device for spine surgery. And he'll be talking about working with strategic partners and collaborating with research institutions. So I hope to see, I hope to see everyone next time. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Emily. This was great.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Follow up if you have any questions. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Bye,
night.
guys.